Good morning, hockey fans. Hope you all had a great weekend. Happy Monday. This is Morning Cuppa Hockey alongside Colby, Cohen. I'm Jonny, Lazarus. We had a lot of stuff happen in the NHL over the weekend. None other bigger than Patrick Roy becoming the new head coach of the New York Islanders, which happened on Saturday. He got his first win in his first game last night in an overtime win against the Dallas Stars. We're going to talk about Corey Perry going to the Edmonton Oilers. Shane Pinto returns for the Ottawa Senators, and then Thomas Hickey will join us later on. So a lot to get into today, but Colby, how was your weekend? Because you were very active.
You mean to tell me that we're not going to talk about the Rangers and they're I know they won last night,
Well,
but
they won, yeah. So
the faltering New York Rangers. I can't believe we're not even gonna talk about them a little bit today. But all right,
didn't
that's
have
fair.
a breakdown unless you want to just bring it up.
I did have a busy weekend. Lots going on. Making new friends left and right on the X platform. I guess we don't call it Twitter anymore. I seem
And
to
some
be
cute
pretty
girl
good at
dad
that,
pics.
Johnny.
Some good girl dad pics. I saw sledding a little bit.
Oh, that was only on my that was on my personal. That was not private. That was a little family outing. We had a little snowstorm. So yeah, first sledding day. Thanks for airing out my private life. I appreciate it, Johnny. I guess we'll have to dive into yours a little bit later. But yeah, I think the hockey world was waiting for some big news, and none other than Patrick Roy coming back to the NHL, a move that not only do I absolutely love, but the other thing that I love about it is that it didn't happen for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because the minute I saw the news on X, my first thought was, wow, the Toronto Maple Leafs missed such a major opportunity to bring in the one guy, probably with enough cachet to wrangle the core four in Toronto. So I guess it's kind of in the spirit right now of bashing the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I didn't even give Lou Lamoriello credit before I immediately went to what a missed opportunity for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So what do you think of it, Johnny? You like the hire? Are you on board with this? You're a New York guy. You're a pretty big Islanders hater. So I'm curious to get your perspective.
Well, after the loss to Chicago, I believe on Friday night, I think everyone knew it was coming. You can't lose that game if you're the Islanders and if you're Lane Lambert in the position he was sitting in. So I don't think it came as a surprise that he got fired on Saturday, but I had no inclination that they were going to go with a guy like Patrick Roy. I think the guy they went with was a big surprise. His name was not like in any running. I feel like, with the Islanders or with any teams this year that were firing coaches, I know his name came up a little bit in the Rangers search last year or in the summer. So his name was floating out there a little bit, but Patrick Roy hasn't coached the NHL in a bunch of years. So, I feel like people were talking about this Islanders team that is in a win now. They need the experienced NHL coach. And not that Watt isn't that, but I thought they'd maybe go with someone that like a Berube, someone who's just been in the league a little bit more recently that could try to help this team get over the hump. But from what I've seen so far, I know it's only been one game in one day, but Patrick Roy is that guy who can, bring an identity back to a team that's lost it. And the Islanders, most people would say they had a pretty strong identity for the last 5-6 years, going back-to-back conference finals. Everyone talked about them having the best fourth line in all of the NHL. You don't really hear those conversations anymore. You don't really think about the Islanders with a team that has swagger. For whatever reason, they've lost it. And I think they had it a little bit under Barry Trotz. Under Lane Lambert, it kind of went away for whatever reason. And, I think Patrick Roy just brings that back a little bit. And if you watched any of the clips from him in practice yesterday, like, it looked like day one of training camp and it was a morning skate. So, I know obviously that's just him trying to, bring in his personality right away and kind of inflict on what he's going to bring to this team. But pretty intense morning skate yesterday before a game against Dallas. Pretty important game of that too.
Yeah, well, look, when a new coach comes in mid-season, there's just so many factors that come into play. I mean, I saw it happen in Chicago when Jeremy Colton got fired, a couple months or whatever into the season, my first year when I was working there, and they brought in Derek King, who, obviously a different personality than Patrick Roy. I mean, Derek King was a great NHL player. But he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer like Patrick Roy, and he wasn't he didn't have the fire Patrick Roy had. But, the one thing I will say, and just to kind of, touch on some of the things you brought up, and who am I kidding? I'm gonna have more than one thing to say. Um,
You
as I
got 10
heard
minutes?
myself, as I heard myself said that, I said, "Geez, I'm lying."
Yeah.
um,
Colby's not
but
really a long story short guy.
um, but you look at his first day, Johnny, and you look at the fact that he is going to have to, put in systems. He is going to have to infuse identity. He's going to have to light a fire under their ass a little bit. And then from the player's perspective, you kind of get on a new footing, right? You almost get a little bit of a blank slate when a new coach comes in, and get the opportunity to kind of, draw your own identity back into the team. I mean, look at a guy like Oliver Wahlstrom, who's been in the doghouse all season with Lane Lambert. He now gets an opportunity to kind of, be a New York Islander again, and have an opportunity. But the reason that I like Patrick Waugh the most, and why I love this hire so much, is really the fact that he's one of these old school guys, but understands new school. And I think he blends the two together.
Mhm.
He's coached junior hockey for, the last number of years in Quebec, which means he's used to working with young players. And so he understands how athletes are a little bit different than even when he coached the Avalanche, 5 years ago, or however long it's
10, like a
been.
decade ago.
You had
Yeah.
six, was it that
He
many
won
years
he won the
ago?
Jack Adams in 2014, 10 years ago.
Wow. So, but I remember back to when he was the coach of the Avalanche, and some guys that I played with in Colorado are still on that team, like Paul Stasny, like Matt Duchene. And I remember his press conference after a win. Okay. They had just won a game, like 4-1, and Matt Duchene scored a goal late in the game to make it 4-1 or 4-0. And in the press conference after the game, Patrick Waugh basically called him a loser and said, "We have a loser mentality for celebrating a fourth goal and a 4-0 win late in the third period." And, Matt Duchene was he the first or second overall pick in the draft? I know he was really
I think
high up
2.
the draft.
I
Top
think 2.
top he's definitely a top 5 pick, okay? I can say that with certainty, but I'm pretty sure he was really high up the rankings. So, you have a guy here who's not afraid to call anybody out. He's not afraid to hold guys accountable. And on top of it, most players playing in the NHL grew up watching him.
Mhm.
And whether you like goalies, whether you were an Avalanche fan, a Montreal fan, whatever would have been, everybody loved and thought he was the, one of the greats. So now you just have this immediate respect inside your dressing room, that I just don't know how many other coaches would have had. And you made a comment, and I'm going to ask you a question about that comment.
Yeah.
Who were the coaches getting mentioned? Like you said, we haven't heard his name brought up. Lou Lamoriello leaks nothing. I mean,
Mhm.
that guy is the most airtight guy in hockey, because he probably doesn't tell anybody else. Like maybe he tells his son, but that's probably it. He probably doesn't even tell the other assistant general managers, which is how you
Mhm.
keep such a leak-free environment. But
Yeah.
who are the other names out there? Because when the Oilers hired Knobloch, that was surprising too. That
Yeah.
wasn't a name I expected to see hired. So, who are you referring to, Johnny?
Well, Craig Berube is one of the names that just came up. Jay Woodcroft. These are coaches that were recently fired this year in the NHL who, I think most people would say deserve to be coaching in the NHL. They're good coaches. Just, time kind of ran out for them and the teams they were coaching. Another name I saw floating around just because, he's done a good job with the Rangers this year as an assistant is Michael Pekka. I saw a couple Islander fans mentioning that. Obviously, he was the captain there for a couple years. So there was the
When you say
Islander
names that
connection
are
there.
floating around, though, are you talking like Fantasyland on Twitter, or are you talking about like credible people that within the hockey world that are talking
Well,
about this, like Frank or one of the other insiders or Kevin Weeks or whatever it may be?
I'm referring in this case to the Islander fan base, the things that I just see on Twitter. Because for the Islanders, I didn't see any insiders talking about names as far as Islanders coaches go because no one knew if they were gonna fire Lane Lambert or not.
I
So
didn't
I
think
haven't.
they would. Just for
Yeah,
the record, and the
yeah.
reason I didn't think Lane Lambert would get fired was because I mean, it's kind of widely speculated that this is Lou Lamoriello's last year. And
Mhm.
so, what ownership group is letting a general manager who's kind of, on the end of the line hire another coach, right? I mean, this will be his third coaching hire, correct? He had Trotz, he
Believe
had
so.
Lambert,
Mhm.
and now he gets Patrick Waugh. General managers usually don't get a third coaching hire when they've not won anything. And I know they've had some good runs, but they haven't won anything. So you just don't usually see that. And that's why, I talked to your buddy Stefan Rosner about this literally the day before it happened. I told him straight up, I don't foresee them giving Lou the ability to make a coaching change right now. And if they do, I would expect it would have to be some sort of interim situation. And
Mhm.
like, how many people are really willing to sign up for that? Now, we come to find out he's not Patrick Waugh was not hired to be an interim head coach. I don't think Waugh would have accepted being an interim head coach, but it is interesting and it makes you wonder what would happen if, let's say, this year doesn't go as planned with Patrick Waugh. I mean, everybody's just assuming he's going to come in and turn this ship around. I think he's a phenomenal coach and he's going to do a great job. But I watched that game last night. At least good chunks of that game. The Islanders didn't play that well. I mean,
Not
they
at
were
all.
lucky to get 2 points. I mean, I thought they were lucky to get a point. The Dallas Stars really carried that game. For the most part, I think the Islanders got great goaltending last night, but they gave up a lot of chances, a lot of rushes. Thought Noah Dobson was easily the best player for the Islanders, which we've seen a lot this year. But just defensively, I mean, I certainly didn't see this change. In style. Which again, how fair is that? The guy had one pregame skate before he gets thrust into his first game, so you can't really expect that much. But
Well,
at
I
the end,
wanted to ask you about that actually, because Patrick Waugh comes in on a game day, has 1 game to work with the team, and then now you look forward, there's only 3 games between now and the All-Star break when the team has a full week off. So what do you do as far as implementing systems here in these next 3 games this week? Because I feel like you don't wanna give the guys too much to think about each game, knowing that they have a full week to maybe obviously the team won't be together in that week, so they won't be able to have, like, meetings and whatnot, but you'll be able to call guys, discuss, just kinda have a week to settle in a little
mhm,
bit? So these 3
yeah.
games I feel like are a little bit interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Patrick Waugh will be, having a lot of conversations with guys potentially at that point. But I think that week, that All Star week, I think there'll be I wouldn't be shocked if the Islanders coaching staff does not go on All Star break,
Mm,
because they kept the assistants. Okay, I know Doug
yep.
Huda, is the defensive coach. He was in Boston when I was. I think he's a great coach, Doug Huda. But I think it'll have to start with kind of getting the assistant coaches on the same page, and then it's going to be a lot of video. And that's the thing about the NHL. These are such good players that you can show them video and then expect that they're going to go out and execute it without having a lot of practice, because you just don't get a lot of practice in an NHL season. So
Mhm.
I think that's going to be key is video. He's probably going to bring video in from games that he's probably already seen that he'll work on. He'll probably have some video from when he was in Colorado.
That's
Um,
something he said also in his press conferences. He said he hasn't watched his team play much, which I thought was, like, pretty interesting to just say openly out loud.
Well, it was probably a cold call that he got from Lou
Yeah.
Lamoriello, and
Yeah.
and I loved Lou Lamoriello's comment. By the way, he's like, somebody asked him, who are the other candidates?" And he literally said there was not another candidate, and I believe him. Lou Lamoriello is the type of guy that he's like, "Okay, that is the guy, and I'm gonna go get him." Like, he has a vision for how things work, agree or disagree, and then he goes and pushes that vision, just like he did when he hired Lane Lambert, which I think caught some people off guard. I don't think people expected that
Mhm.
necessarily. So, video, Jonny, I think these next 3 games, you can't give them too much, right? You
Yeah,
don't
that's
want players on the ice to be, you know,
overthinking.
overthinking just caught up in where do I need to be. Like, you need guys to read and react and play hockey. I'm sure they'll make little tweaks. I'm sure there'll be little small meetings with power play and penalty kill and just this and that. But I think right now for him, he's probably, spending a little bit of time evaluating who and what he has to see, who's going to be, who are guys he's going to count on and be reliable, moving forward.
Well, I think the biggest thing also in that game last night, before we move on to the next topic, is that the game-winning goal was Barzal to Horvat. Like, those are the 2 guys the Islanders need to be the best players every night, and the coach's first game, it's those 2 guys that connect on the game-winning goal, and it was a hell of a play by Matt Barzal too. He took away the puck from Duchesne in the D zone and then sprung Horvat free on the breakaway. But just a big feel-good win for the Islanders, and, good for Patrick Roy to get started, and then Thursday night, the Islanders head into Montreal, where Patrick Roy won 2 Stanley Cups, so it's gonna be a crazy emotional week for him, I'm sure, but excited to see what he does with the
Yeah.
Islanders, and it's good to have them be competitive. Like, I
I
think
agree. Listen,
it's
it's you
better
want
for
you
this
want New
area.
York, you want New York teams, you want the Metro Division. So it'll be interesting though. There'll be fireworks, there'll be flames. We're gonna have Thomas Hickey on in about 10-15 minutes. He works for the TV broadcast for MSG. He's between the benches and he's a studio guy for them. So, he'll have a front row seat to this whole Patrick Roy situation. So we'll kind of table the law conversation for about 10-15 minutes until Hickey joins us. But other news, Johnny, over the weekend that I don't think is that surprising is that it does look like Corey Perry is going to be heading to the Oilers. There has not been an official confirmation on this from the team, but as we saw over the weekend, Frank Saravalli tweeted and talked about the fact that he should be joining the team any day. He's been skating and training. Look, this is a big get for the Edmonton Oilers, in my opinion, because you get a guy on close to a league minimum deal that really can impact your lineup in so many different ways. I mean, I said it on Oilers Nation a couple, maybe a week or 2 ago. I said it on DFO Live as well. This was a fit that really made a lot of sense rather than going to Toronto and necessarily being in the Mecca in Toronto. And Johnny, I look at this lineup and it's solid, but I think Corey Perry can fit in a lot of places in this lineup and have a real impact. Where do you see him fitting with the group that they're rolling out on the ice right now? Hottest team in the NHL, by the way.
Well, yeah, the Oilers have won 13 games in a row, and I want to quote the great Liam McHugh, who quoted the great Charles Oakley. Liam tweeted yesterday, "I get that there's a lot to like about this, but I can't get the words of the great warrior poet Charles Oakley out of my head, who's a former New York Knick. If it ain't broke, don't break it." The Oilers are 21-3 in their last 24 games, and now they're bringing in Corey Perry. So, like, do I think it's the best thing for them? I don't know. I mean, they're rolling right now. You bring in a guy like Corey Perry, who's coming in. Obviously he's a legend in the NHL.
Johnny, I don't know is unacceptable. Take a side of the fence, buddy. Either you like it or you don't. I don't know doesn't work for me.
I
What
don't
do you
have
think?
I don't have a strong feeling on it. I don't. Can I just be honest and be genuine in how I feel about it? I don't have a
No,
strong
lie.
feeling.
I'd rather you lie. Have an opinion for once about something.
What do you mean? I have plenty of opinions. This one, like, I know what Corey Perry brings, but I also see a team that doesn't need anything right now. No one's beating them. What are you bringing in a guy who has
I
a
mean, do you
ton
think
of
they're going to
baggage?
win their next? You think they're going to win their next 40 games?
Well, they have a ton. He just has a ton of baggage right now with everything that went down, and it's just
Yeah, but that
outside
happened.
drama.
That was the same thing with Evander Kane. They brought him into that locker
Did
room.
they
Connor
win?
McDavid quieted it right down. All that drama with Evander Kane. You don't really hear about it anymore. You don't hear
What do you
about
mean? They threw his ex-wife out of a game last week.
You know what? But that's Twitter. There's a difference between Twitter and the locker room. Okay, I know you
True.
live in the world of Twitter and
Well, I'm not in
sunshine
the
and
locker room.
rainbows, but the reality is that players don't really give a shit about a lot of that inside the dressing room. And you've got a guy in Corey Perry who's been to the Cup multiple times. He can play anywhere in your lineup. He literally can play on your first line or he can play on your fourth line and he can be effective. And how about this? He was having a good season in Chicago this year.
Great season.
I mean, he was playing with Bedard at times. He was playing in the net front of the power play. He's physical. He's a guy who understands situational hockey. He knows when to drag his team into a fight. He knows when to be the center of attention to keep other guys away from it. Look, what happened in Chicago happened. It was a personal off the ice incident. But look, I talked to the coaches in Chicago and I talked to players in Chicago. They were not happy to lose him. Players and coaches were devastated because of the impact that he was having on that dressing room. And you can have, another guy in your dressing room who's respected, in the dressing room. Look, out of the rink, personal life, he's got shit that he needs to get together.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. Okay? No doubt about that. I'm not here to comment on his personal life. That's not our thing here. Okay? We're talking in the locker room for the team. And for that, this is a guy who makes you better immediately. Immediately. And when you look at his cap hit versus what he brings, he even has more of an impact.
Yeah.
So,
Low risk, high reward.
look, I'm going to go back to it. Another miss by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He would have been great in that locker room, a locker room who absolutely needs leadership and accountability.
I would say he would be an even better fit in New York with the Rangers because they are desperate for a top line right
and
winger.
they were a team that were a suitor. It was New
Yeah.
York, it was Toronto,
Tampa again, right?
it was Tampa, and it was Edmonton. And I think he wanted to go play with the best player in the world. I truly believe that has a huge role in it. Is that's why he wanted to head that way.
Panthers as well.
And Panthers, of course. I mean, who doesn't want to go down there and be
That
a part
would
of
have
that?
been fun. That would have been fun to see him play in Florida. I would have loved that.
It just,
Imagine.
Again, he's the type of utility player that you can just plug him anywhere. And I think those guys are really valuable. And he understands who he is now. He's not the 80 point, 90 point, 100 point guy, anymore. It's.
I know we don't want to talk about his personal life, but what do you think about him going to Edmonton with like the media market and everything he's about to face, with the questions and all that stuff? I mean, they're not going to hold back, right? They never do. I think it was Winnipeg that asked Bedard about like the rumor that was spread on fucking Twitter.
I mean, look, there's always going to be idiots who ask stupid questions. And I think, look, you choose a job in the public spotlight, you're going to get questions about your private life, whether it's fair or unfair. It doesn't really matter what you or I think. He's going to have to face it. He's going to have to talk about certain things. I think the other thing is that he's going to answer some questions and then they're going to have to put it to bed. And he's probably not going to go too deep into certain topics because they are personal. They have to do with his family life, his off ice life. But at the end of the day, there was no legal, there was no lawsuits. There was nothing legal that came of it. So again, he'll answer some questions. He'll put it to bed and then he's going to play for the Edmonton Oilers and whatever he needs to deal with will be dealt with personally and privately. And again, these are human beings. Okay. Human beings have different issues. They have issues at home. They have drinking issue, whatever the case may be, they're people. And so I don't think it will be as brutal as it would have been had he been in Toronto. But it is a Canadian hockey market and Canada treats, hockey like the NFL is treated here in the US. But the news cycle keeps moving, Johnny. It does. I mean, look what happens every week. First it was Gauthier, and then it was Sleepy, and then it was, or it was Perry, and then it was Gauthier, and then it was Patrick Waugh, and the news cycle continues.
Yeah, I wonder who's up next. I mean, do we want to dive into Shane Pinto too? He made his return yesterday. He was in the news cycle earlier this year, and he comes out, plays his first game after serving a 41-game suspension in Philadelphia, of all places. And you see the smile on his face, happy to be back in the lineup, get a win, contribute with an assist. So great to see. I don't know if you caught the post-game video that the Ottawa Senators posted. They gave out that fire hat to Tarasenko, and Tarasenko passed it over to Shane Pinto, a good Long Island boy. I know Shane pretty well, and I know how much he was hurting, that he missed a lot of time this year, and something that was a little bit, controversial in the way it happened, but it's so tough. And I could kind of speak to it too, just from, it's obviously a little different, but I had to redshirt for a full year and I felt fully healthy and I couldn't skate. I couldn't travel. I couldn't be with my teammates. And talking to Shane a little bit about that, over his 41-game suspension, that's what hurts the most, is you feel like you can play, you feel healthy, you feel like you can contribute at the NHL level too. And the game is just kind of taken from you. So to see him have that new appreciation, it's almost like a blessing in disguise where he's just like never taking another second. Not that he did, but never taking a second in the NHL for granted. And I'm very excited for him. And hopefully the Ottawa Senators can turn it around.
Well, the Ottawa Senators are not going to turn it around, and I'm pretty sure you had the worst take of the year on
Ever,
social media
ever.
about the Ottawa Senators. I think you said you'd bet your
I bet
life
my life they'll make the playoffs
that
this
they
year.
make the playoffs this year, and I'm pretty sure within like minutes I responded that I hope you're an organ donor, because that is just not going to happen. Hey,
Yeah.
look, it's good to have Pinto back. He got himself obviously caught up in an unfortunate situation. I know we're going to try to have him on the show sometime in the next 2 weeks. So maybe
We're
we'll
hoping
get his,
Wednesday. Hopefully Wednesday.
okay. So maybe
Yeah.
this week. So, maybe we'll get his perspective on things a little bit more. I think he's a great player. I don't think he's willing the Ottawa Senators to a playoff spot. It was a good win though against the
Yeah.
Flyers. I mean, the Flyers were in full control of that game, and they really turned up the heat. I like seeing Claude Giroux have success. He was such a great guy in Philadelphia, getting to know him a little bit. I think he gets shit on kind of unfairly. He was kind of put in on mediocre teams in Philadelphia for a very long time. So we'll kind of save the Pinto talk, I think, until we get him on the show Wednesday. But I think now would kind of be a good time to bring in our friend Thomas Hickey to the show, and ask him a couple hundred questions about what's going on in Long Island. So welcome into the show, man. Thanks for doing this with us.
Hey guys, yeah, you got it. Good to have you.
Hair's looking luscious, by the way, this morning.
Always, your hair
know,
always
over
looks
there.
good.
It's cranky this morning. I think I just I woke up, had a cold shower, so it could be it might have a mind of its own this morning.
The cold showers on purpose. Well, I could borrow some hot water if you have any, because my apartment right now in Brooklyn's out of hot water and out of heat. So if you can let me crash
that's no
with you for
good.
a couple days.
Yeah, come on
that.
over.
But Hick, you've been very close to this Patrick Waugh situation for the last 2 days. Obviously, a huge win for the Islanders last night. Can you just talk about the vibe around the rink with him? And is it still weird for you seeing Patrick Waugh in Islander colors? Because I think it's weird for everybody else.
Yeah, it is weird for me. I think it's strange for everyone. If it was over the summer, I think you got time to get used to it. But when it's less than 24 hours and he's behind the bench, and see him in Islander blue and at a morning skate and stuff, really strange. But it works and it looks good on him. Yesterday was crazy. He had a morning skate and it looked like day one of training camp practice. It was extremely intense, and I think that's what this group needs. Look, Lane Lambert, I think he exhausted all of his options as far as how does he get this group to be consistent and play with the passion that that's in there. This is a group that the core of it has done really impressive things and played some great hockey, and made it to a couple conference finals. And it's tough playing at that level, finding that level. And Lane Lambert he at the end he couldn't find the way. He relied on his veterans, and for whatever reason, the buttons weren't being pushed, or maybe guys needed a motivational voice or someone with a ton of intensity. And in comes Patrick Waugh, extremely intense, and that's what I heard from every single guy. Passionate, a fiery look in his eyes, and from morning skate to the buzzer blown to end the game and going into overtime, extremely intense. And that was the boost that I think this team needed. Feed off passion and emotion, and that's what last night was about. And look, they got outplayed, they got outshot badly by Dallas. Really controlled the first period, and then you saw some things creep back in, but nothing's going to get fixed overnight. It's going to take some time. But what they did do is they played with a lot of energy. They played with a lot of grit, and I think that was the right start. And in the end, they came from behind. They found a way to win. So in the end of it, it was sort of a perfect night where I think a lot of things that had plagued them were prevalent, and that's stuff that Waugh can take and with the way he's developed his coaching, you think he can turn it around and fix some of those areas. But the intensity was there.
Well, I think we both know from being around the pro game for some years, when a new coach comes in like that, everybody finds an extra 15%, 20% at all times, right? Because it's a blank slate. Players will be going out of their way to finish their check. Players will be going down to block shots maybe a little bit more. I know the Islanders kind of do a lot of that stuff naturally anyway, but did you sense a little more desperation in the group that maybe you haven't seen in the last little while, because it's guys are basically now re-auditioning to, and I know certain players are where they are and they're going to stay where they are, but there's also a group of guys that this presents a major opportunity to kind of reinvigorate themselves and sort of get themselves back in the good graces of the coaches and the management and really the organization.
Definitely. I think you saw it from everyone. And when you look at the coaching changes this year, three of them in particular, you've got this amazing bounce after you hire your new coach in Minnesota and St. Louis, Edmonton. That's continued on. I think they're a different level than those other teams, but it's not always, in my opinion, it's not always the indication of the coaching right away. And look what they did. It's what you talked about, Colby. It's everyone's getting in line to audition once again because coaches, when you play for a coach for a certain amount of time, you build up equity with the good things that you do and the hard work that you put in and all the smart, right, proper plays that you make. And there's a little bit less, there's a little more room to chip away at that because you still got, your piggy bank full of goodwill. And when a new coach comes in, he doesn't owe anyone anything. He wants to make the playoffs just as the players do, but he's going to go with the guys that are going to show him that. And I think with those teams that went on those winning streaks after, the biggest part of it is guys motivated to make sure that they're the ones playing a big part of it.
Mm.
And I think that's what you saw last night. I think you'll continue to see it for a while, and then hopefully after that, you maintain that level and you see team improvements that are going to last for more than maybe a dozen games. But I saw that last night from every single guy, and I think, look, I'm not. This is just my opinion. Matt Barzal, Bo Horvat, Brock Nelson. I know where they're going to be slotted in. Those are the top two lines. Those are the guys that you're going to rely upon. But it's a roster built with a lot of veteran guys that who knows what roles are going to be. You can shift into different spots. Who's going to be in the lineup? Who's going to be out of the lineup? That stuff is to be determined, and I think that's why you see that extra boost. And everyone's finishing their checks. Everyone's sticks are detailed. And I think I'm really fond of this group. Even throughout their struggles, that there's a lot of character in there too, and I think that's going to show, and maybe maybe more than just a dozen games. It's something that if they can find a way to get into the playoffs, that's why I think people are a little bit. No one really wants to play the Islanders at playoff time, no matter what the record was all season. But if you've got that extra bite and a group that looks a little bit reinvigorated, it's a good thing for them.
I saw you freezing doing the studio stuff outside. They have that kind of cool setup for you guys where those outdoor rinks are outside of the arena. Were you also between the benches last night? I know some nights you're like literally running between the two. Were you between last night?
Yeah, I was. So we have a great setup, and for anyone in the New York area, like the job
awesome.
that ownership has done. Yeah, Jonny, it's incredible. People can come and skate before the game, and it's like BYOB. They've got a beer garden out there, TVs, music. They've got it all. So we were out there for pregame, and it was really chilly yesterday, especially. It's like I'm from Calgary. I've gotten a little bit soft the more I've been in New York. We've had so many mild winters. And I always step outside. Oh, okay, this isn't that bad. But when you're standing out there for an hour, that's when it gets into your bones and it gets cold. And our crew was out there for much longer than Shannon Hogan and I were. But yeah, so I was there, and then I sprint in, get down in time for puck drop, and then we stayed inside for the rest of the night.
So,
but
what was that? I want to hear about that. You have the best seat in the house. I mean, the between the bench spot is the best seat in the house. So now you're doing it with Patrick Waugh 5 feet beside you. I mean, what an iconic figure to get to kind of look and watch and study that closely. So was there anything that threw you, or were you extra dialed in on what was happening on the bench last night? I just got to think that experience was probably really cool, but also really interesting.
Yeah, my thing down there is, be vocal, but sort of be invisible as far as I'm not getting in the way of anything. But I found myself glancing over a lot more because, with Lane Lambert, I'm looking at every coach, but you want to see what makes them tick. And some guys have physical cues that give it away that they're upset or they're angry. And, there was many times where a play would happen on the ice. This is, last season and earlier this season. And, I knew that if I looked over, Lane Lambert would probably be shaking his head because there's little things that he dislikes, doesn't want to see show up. And they're sort of obvious ones. And if you played the game, you'd know, but certain things make certain coaches tick. So, I know sometimes, okay, I don't have to look over. I know he's going to be upset with that play. But last night I was just watching what was like and seeing the intensity. It was, after every shift, putting his arm around someone, having a conversation. And I think that's going to die down a little bit. It's going to fizzle, but he's trying to connect with his players. And the other thing that stood out, he can whistle like as loud as better than the officials that have whistles. And the funny thing was, I talked to Brendan Burke, our play-by-play guy. Brendan's sensational. Him if you watch Islander broadcasts or TNT broadcasts, and he was at the morning skate, and he said he didn't have a whistle and he doesn't use his fingers. He just whistles, and all of a sudden it gets everyone's attention. I said, "Oh, that was impressive." It was early in the first period, and I looked over, and he wanted to get his guys out on a change. He saw a matchup he liked. He was going with Barzell, Horvat, Lee, and all of a sudden you heard him whistle, and I could hear it. What was that? And I look, and Cal Clutterbuck's down at the hash marks in the like 130 feet away, and Cal turns and looks and sprints over to the bench like that whistle. It's going to
Like
stick
an
with me, and I'm
obedient
not.
dog.
Sounds like my dog.
Yeah.
The whistle I do
Don't.
for Oliver. I'm telling
Yeah,
you right
don't.
now, I do that at the dog park, and he comes 100 yards
Yeah.
when he hears that whistle.
That's exactly what it is. It's like, don't do it to a bartender, but if you can do it to your players or your dog, and it'll work. But definitely some command there. That's the one thing that stood out. But just the intensity in his eyes, and I think from a kid watching him play, that's what I think of when I think Patrick Waugh. I don't think so much of the saves is the intensity, and even through his mask you could see those eyes, and that's the same passion that it looks like he's coaching with. And that's what really stood out. Just extremely vocal. The puck was around the bench, and he's loud. But it was fun. He actually talked after the game about him settling into the game. And as the game went on, calmed down just a little bit. And I think for him, he said, I'm still trying to figure out the balance because, he coached in the NHL 7 years ago. He won a Jack Adams trophy. He clearly played in the league. He knows how to communicate with players, but he's also been working with junior players for the last 5 seasons or so. And, I think that balance for him, and, he even said it out loud, sort of, trying to figure out what's too much, what's not enough, but certainly the intensity early on in a group that doesn't know him yet. I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, I saw he spoke for like 15 minutes after the game last night, which is usually pretty long for a head coach after a game. And then I also did hear a ton of people saying that you could hear Patrick Waugh's voice echo through the entire UBS arena the entire game last night with how loud he was barking on the bench. But something I'm really curious about, Hick, is he's the only NHL head coach that's a goalie. And you look at Ilya Sorokin, the season he's had, I think he's been the backbone of that team for so many years now. Obviously, this season has been a little bit different. He hasn't had to carry them as much. What does this do for him? Because you look at the Islanders and you look at players like you mentioned, Brock Nelson, Matt Barzal, Bo Horvat. We've talked about Noah Dobson on this show for 10 straight episodes and how he deserves to be an NHL All-Star. But there's no denying the fact that Ilya Sorokin is the most important player on that team. What does having a guy like Patrick Waugh do for him and his confidence?
I think the most interesting thing that I heard from his press conference when he got hired was, he said, "Look, I'm going to give a answer that I don't think you guys are going to be too thrilled about." But he said, "I trust my goalie coaches, and on Long Island, Pierre Greco, who's been here for since Barry Trotz came in, and he's got a unique relationship with both of the goalies." And what Patrick Waugh said is, "I trust them. I'm a coach. I'm not gonna pry too much or get my take in there. He's going to let the goalie coaches do their thing." But in the post game, Ilya's had, I think it was 43 shots. Two of them went in. One of them actually wasn't a great goal, which you don't see from him too much. You've seen it a little bit more this year. But after the game, Patrick Waugh said, "Look, I don't know what the 3 stars were, but I'm sure he was the first star. And I had a little laugh to myself because that was just your standard Ilya Sorokin performance. He was really good. He
Mhm.
saw a lot of pucks. He was square to it. He was always at the top of his paint, and he made a bunch that he just makes look easy because he's so gifted. And in my mind, no, Ilya wasn't one of the first stars, but this is one of the best goalies of all time saying I was blown away seeing it in person. And I thought he was our best guy, and he's going to get that every single night. And Sorokin, I think it's up to 14 games in a row he's played now. Varlamov has been hurt. It sounds like he's skating, and hopefully he's back soon. But the other part of that, not just with Wah helping Sorokin, Semyon Varlamov, he helped win a Jack Adams Trophy for Patrick Waugh. He was a Vezina nominee that year, so there's trust in both guys, and I think the most important thing probably for this group is getting back to two goaltenders because when if you aspire to do the things that you're going to do, you can't ride one guy for the rest of the season, and I think they know that, and it'll be a big help to get Varley back. But I just think having someone like Waugh there, and I didn't even think of that. He is the only goaltender to be a head coach. I think it's a boost because it sounds like he's not going to get involved in technique or little things, but I'm sure he's got so much knowledge to pass along, even if it's just an observation, maybe with with mindset or a little detail that could help these goalies along.
Well, it's always great to get your insight here, especially because again, you've got the best seat in the house to watch this guy. We didn't just bring you on here to ask you about Patty Waugh, though. There are some personal things we got to talk about with you.
Here it comes.
I think personal for me and personal for Jonny. But I did appreciate last week on Twitter, Hicks, when you clarified Jonny drama over here, trying to stir up beef with the Islanders Nation. I mean, look, this guy loves the Rangers.
They can thank me now. I got him Patrick Waugh.
Any chance
there you
he
go.
gets, he shits on the Islanders. He shits on Islander fans too, which like I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I think go after the club, but fans are passionate. Fans are gonna fan. So Jonny, he called them scumbags or whatever he called them. But then here you come. You're such a nice guy. And you're just like, whoa, pump the brakes here. So I'm glad you put Jonny drama in his place on Twitter. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And look, look, we know how much Jonny hates the Islanders, and I'm surprised I'm even here talking to him right now.
I had to pull strings to get you in here today. Don't worry, Jonny tried to fight.
My DMs didn't work. He didn't open my DMs.
But jokes aside, to Jonny, look, anything without context, hockey, whatever it is, whatever you see, anything without context, you wonder and you ask questions. And, I know it was more of a question than a statement from you, but, there's situations that take place, and I'm glad I was there and able to say that, look, this looked bad. If I were opening up my phone and that's what I saw and didn't have any context, it's like, look, did these guys just quit on the game? What's going on? But reality is it was absolutely nothing. It was just a misunderstanding when the final buzzer blows and you're dejected after really just an awful loss in a team that was just played their hearts out, one of their better games of late, trying to get back in and lose in that fashion. Then all of a sudden 3-1 empty netter, buzzer goes off, everyone leaves. And it looked bad, but truly it was nothing. So glad I could play middleman there and make sure that didn't go any further.
I'm still getting shit on for that by Islander fans.
Yeah, well, they can hold a grudge, so you gotta be careful. But I think they're just as passionate, right? And when you do have the context, you're like, look, don't get us. Let's not get misunderstood here because it really was nothing. But that's the internet, and that's how things work, and that's why it's good to have multiple voices in the room.
Well, look, if the internet existed in 2007, I probably would have sent some hateful tweets to you, Hicks, because I just remember going back to our draft year, sitting in the stands. And it's funny, you went 4th overall to the LA Kings back in, I think it was 2007, right? I'm
that's
not
right.
mistaken. We're in Columbus, Ohio. The draft rankings come out. That was a defensive heavy rated draft. The way, I don't remember, I don't know if it was Central Scouting back then or if it was something else, but they rank all the skaters. I remember being ranked about 15th. Had all the meetings, and we felt like I was going to go in the first round of the draft that year. But I'll never forget the way it was all supposed to shake out, who was supposed to get drafted where. And here comes 4th overall, the LA Kings, and they're supposed to draft, I believe Carl Alsner was the guy they were supposed to draft, right? Media bullshit. And then they announce you, okay, with that pick. And I remember looking at my dad in that moment and my agent and being like, oh shit, this is not good for me. This is really not good for me, because there was a crop of defensemen that were better players at the time that were rated higher, with Alsner and Ellerby and Shaddy and McDonough. Like, there was a group of really, high end talented guys, obviously you being one of them. But I remember that coming out of left field a little bit. And I remember, like, for years, man, I was so angry and mad at you, and I hated you so much for that. Even when we play against each other in the American League, I'm like, this guy, like, obviously we had never met. And then we meet last year, and you're such a nice human being. And I'm like, all right, I guess I gotta drop the old draft hatred towards him, because he's such a good guy. And it's funny. I mean, I just always remember how funny and stupid all that stuff was from, we're young kids at the time, teenagers. But I don't know if I ever actually told you that, when in the times that we've talked. So I figured I'd air it out with you now. But I remember it really well, and remember it like it was yesterday.
You've really been holding that in, huh?
Yeah, well, we got that off our chest. No, that's good. But it's funny, Colby, you're right. Like, back then, like, there's so much detail about prospects now, more information you can take in. And before, it was like, there's some rankings, and you can't find a clip of anyone. You just sort of take everyone's word. You don't see much. You're gonna, stream a Western Hockey League game or a college game or a USHL game, trying to figure out who's who. Well, you don't really have time to do that as a player. It was a shock to me too. I think thought I was going slightly after that, but I think LA, they didn't let on to me that I was going to be their pick, and in the end, it didn't work out for me in LA, but it certainly shaped my career and my life, and it was cool. But just goes to show,
Yeah.
we're so young at that time when you get picked, and there's still so much left to be determined. And I think that's changed in a lot of ways now. You see guys making an impact so much sooner. But what a memory that was for me and my family, and it was so cool. But at the end of the day, you look at that draft, and Ryan McDonough, what a career he's had. Stanley Cups, he's
Unbelievable.
captain of the Rangers. He's done it all. And he was later on further down in that first round.
And he got traded before he ever played for Montreal. Montreal
Yeah.
traded him before he ever played there. So look, I think you're the prime example, Hicks, of a guy who had to go to the American League and had to develop his game in Manchester. And again, I'd see you all the time. We played against each other weekend after weekend in the American League, because that's all we pretty much did was play
12,
4 or 5
12 times a year. Yeah. Portland,
right,
Providence,
yeah.
Worcester.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're just the quintessential guy. You were patient. You paid your dues in the American League, and then you strung together a like 500 game NHL career, after spending a good amount of time in the American League, which, look, I got to be honest with you, not a lot of guys are capable of doing that. I was not. I got impatient. I jetted off to Europe. I didn't have the mentality that you did to fight through and stick with it. So you deserve a lot of credit for that, man. And you really did have a good run there on the island, and fit a really nice role for those guys. And you were consistent. You put up 20 points a year and more, 22, 25. You just brought a number of different things to that team. So, your draft experience was special. Obviously I remember mine, and you'll always be a part of mine. As long as I can remember it, I'll always remember that and that feeling in that moment. So whether you like it or not, pal, we'll be connected forever, at least when I tell the story.
You're forever part of mine too, Colby. So we've got that in common. But no, it's funny, and like I get it with the American League. American League is hard, and I tell people all the time um it's an extremely difficult league to play in. And I came out of junior and had a few games, and I was like, this is easy. And then all of a sudden, you go through a full year, and it's really tough. And I think my patience was waning a little bit, but at the same time, I was still building up my game, and I never felt like it was at the point where I said, I'm batting down some doors. I want to be in the NHL. I deserve to be. It was sort of a slow build and some injuries early on where had to find myself. But it's tough. And then going there later on in my career, it's difficult hockey, and I say it to people, the NHL is easier to play in if you're a defenseman like yourself, Colby, or me, where you want to get your head up and make a pass. Sometimes it's chaotic and you don't have those things there. And I can understand not having the patience to stick around because it's taxing and demanding. And yes, you get treated well, and it's the second best league in North America, but definitely tempting if I would have been there for much longer. Not to jet off and do what you did, but just looking back now, so happy with the way it worked out. And it was a career builder and a character builder to spend the time I did down there for sure.
You should feel honored by those compliments, Hick, because I called Colby my senior year of college. He looked at my elite prospects and said, "Hey, buddy, you should probably hang him up and just try medium." So I didn't really have the patience either, but I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't ask you this question, Hick, because you've been around the Islanders organization now for a decade. I grew up in Sasset, Long Island. I've been around Islander players my entire life, Islander fans my entire life. I've worked in Matt Martin camps. So, I see what the players do to the community. You were here, Nassau Coliseum, you played in the Barclays Center, you see UBS Arena get built. Can you just talk about this organization and just how it's grown in the last decade and what it means for the NHL if the Islanders are good? Because I think that's something that we talked about earlier before you joined also, is how bringing Patrick Waugh in, and I don't want to make this about him, but just how great it is for the NHL to have the Islanders be a very good organization and a good team.
I think it's crucial. And I've been through the times when we moved to Brooklyn for a little bit, and I think that was tough because it growing up here, the fan base is loyal, passionate, and it's Long Island's team. It's not just a team in New York, and that's what stands out the most. And look, when I first got here, this wasn't a place that guys wanted to come play. There was the stigma that was built up because you come to Long Island once or twice a year. You stay at the Long Island Marriott right across from the Coliseum, and you go, this is cool. What an atmosphere. But outside of that, is there anything out here? Like, can we get back to the city? And once you play here for a little bit, all of a sudden, I live here now, and at the time there was one or two guys that owned a place, and that was it. And you look at the team now, people call this home, and I think that's what people around here want to see. They want to see out in the community, and such passionate hockey loving, Islander loving fans. And and a big market too. The support that we get. So I think you've got it to the point now where that love of the community and being here is out there, and it sort of seeps onto the ice. And I think you've seen that with the results of the team turning into a team that's a playoff hockey team every year, and also a team that I think easy to hate on if you're around the league and don't know enough about it, and sort of creates this feeling. But it takes it back to the guys that won all the cups in the 70s and 80s, and they sort of established that, and that's why we're here now. If it didn't work out then, I don't think it would be back. But the fact that it's strong and alive, and you've got a new rink, and hockey's going to be here for a long time, it is great for the league. And I think the league obviously feels the same way, just with the commitments it's made, and having a new rink, and hopefully more exciting things happening there. But it's growing the game as well, Jonny. Like we talked about, the park at Belmont, and everything they're doing. And there's kids in the NHL, guys in the NHL that grew up here. So it's more than just a place where a team is. It's a great hockey city.
Yeah,
Well, I
even
think the other thing
Northwell.
that could be great for the league would be a Butch Goring versus Biz Nasty cage match out in the middle of Belmont Park. Maybe we get some sock 'em boppers. I don't know if Hicks, you remember that from when we were kids, those big inflatable. I know my parents used to buy them for us, and my older brother would have open season on me with those things. So that would also be great for the league. Love to see Butch Goring
I
standing up
I
for
just
himself on there.
got gifted a Belmont Bullies shirt the other day, so we're gonna start wearing that at some point. But Butchie's face on it, and I think Bissonnette called us the Belmont Bullies, referring to Butch. But look, when you talk about passion and the reason why there's hockey here, that's Butch Goring. And
Yep.
if you slander, he might be coming after you, Johnny. You slander the Islanders at all.
I was hoping he would. I was
Butch
dying for that.
He's
what's funny?
he's gonna be right there. It's who he is, and he loves it here so much, just like the rest of us do. So it's funny, it's friendly, it's at the same time, that's Butch. He's gonna tell you how it is, and I love that about him.
Look,
Butchie doesn't know.
I don't draw a lot of lines for people that I'm, when it comes to confrontation. Usually if I see a line, I'm like, oh, let me cross it. The one line I don't cross is Barstool. That is a line I will not cross, whether it's Chicklets or any other. So all the more credit to Butch for going back and forth and like, I think even though it feels like they're going at it, I feel like it's also like
It's
in
good
fun. Yeah, like I think it's in good fun. You may know differently, Hicks, but I love that whole thing. I've talked about it numerous times. Honestly, I love it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's in good fun and a little bit in good seriousness too. But look, obviously everyone knows I don't think they're actually gonna drop the gloves and go at it, but I think it's just it's not a bad thing at all to spark conversation, and obviously I think Bissonnette, what he does, he grows the game. It's good for the game, and all of a sudden it's a conversation, and all of a sudden it's people around here getting behind Butch and screw this guy. We're gonna stand up for ourselves, and that's sort of the culture and the DNA that is around here, and the pride that we have.
Well, speaking of pride, and I was gonna bite my tongue and not ask, but I've never asked an Islander player about this day, so I'm just curious about what went on. You don't have to give me an opinion or anything, but with player group chats, team chats, and everything, the day that Tavares signed in Toronto, what was it like just being a player on that team and maybe hearing it for the first time and just how you guys reacted? Because obviously we know it's still a storyline 6 years later, which is crazy, but it's not crazy because we're talking about Long Island hockey fans here. Can you take us through just like the group chat or just the initial response from the players and the team? Because I feel like we haven't heard that opinion out loud much.
Yeah, I think everyone's got a different one, right? You're each your own person. For me, I was a free agent myself, and I was looking to stay here and hoped it worked out. And I didn't know if that was going to be part of the equation with John or not. But I was going to his wedding later on that summer. To me, you make the choice that's best for you. It gutted that he wasn't sticking around, but I would encourage any teammate to follow your heart and right decision, wrong decision. I don't think there is one when you pick what you want to do, and that was too bad. But at the same time, it sort of unified us in the sense that everyone just wrote us off after he decided to go to Toronto, and we weren't wrote off at all. We were a great hockey team that next year. We were, better than the Leafs, and in a way, it pulled us together. It would have been nice to know ahead of time, sure, but these are difficult decisions, and I was going through free agency at the exact same time. It's really tough. I've never held that over him one bit, but in the end, when we talk about the pride and wanting to stick around and people wanting to be here, that just made it all the more clear that if he's gone, it doesn't mean that we don't have what so many guys have built in the past, and I think you saw that come right back out. But still friendly with John, and still appreciate the animosity that's around here that people have for him. That's totally fine by me. Two things can be true.
I just laugh every time because I know it's just how it works at every level with teams. Like there are group chats. So like I'm just thinking, did John just sign Toronto and be like, hey boys, I'm sure you saw the news, but
Johnny, just remember something.
What?
Hicks and I are from the 80s, okay? We're
still
not
group
YouTube,
chats in
we're not
2018, dude.
kids, all right? We're not YouTube kids like you guys, all right?
There's-
We're not sliding into DMs and on the TikTok and whatnot. So it is a little different
On
for
the
guys
TikTok,
born.
oh my God.
It's a little different than guys born in the 80s. All right. So
I'm not saying John Tavares sent a Snapchat with a peace sign and said later, boys. Like, I just come on. You know what I mean? Like, it's a thing. Like, people write a message in the group, like, thanks for all the memories, boys. But like, John Tavares left the chat. You know, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I know, and I think we all had good closure. That was sort of it was a fun time in the sense, and I'm sure you guys have been through it or going through it at that point where we sort of grew up together as a group, and everyone was getting married within a year or two of one another, and there was plenty of time to connect in the summer and have your proper send offs, and then everyone had kids at the same time, and so there was plenty of opportunity for good closure after that.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear your perspective on it, Hick. And seriously, we want to thank you so much for just joining us this morning. I'll actually be at the game on Tuesday night, so I'll throw a snowball at you from behind you in the park when we
Yeah,
do a game show.
pop over. Yeah,
Um,
bring me maybe a cup of hot chocolate or something too.
yeah, I got you. I got you. But thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. And we'd love to talk to you throughout the year as the Islanders hopefully continue in the right direction here.
You got it, boys. Good talking to you. Talk to you soon.
All right, that was really cool to talk to Hick. I
Yeah.
mean, that was like 30 minutes. So we
Yeah,
really wanna thank you for
longer
giving us
than we
time.
thought. I mean, listen,
Mhm.
he's a broadcaster now. You can catch him on MSG with the Islanders, and here's what I'll say about that. And hopefully he doesn't hear this, but a lot of times teams hire former players to work on their broadcasts just because they're former players and they're absolutely terrible. They don't put the work in, they just show up. But like, watch Thomas Hickey on the Islanders broadcasts because he brings so much when he's down between the benches. He's got such a good eye for the game because he was a smart player as a defenseman. He was a high hockey IQ type of guy. He always kind of made the right plays and he could see the game so well. So he's gotten really good on TV. I mean, I know he's doing some stuff for NHL Network now. It's really only a matter of time before either ESPN or TNT scoops him up to start working on one of the national broadcasts. But you got to think he's probably the heir to the booth whenever Butch Goring does hang him up. But again, I was so bad when I first started broadcasting. Like, it took me years to feel even okay. And Hicks comes along within his first like 2 years and he's really good at it. I mean, he really is. I mean, he looks the part, the hair's great and everything, but he does a really nice job on those broadcasts. So make sure you check him out on there. Check him out on the NHL Network. I'm sure we'll be calling on him to come back on our show after we see a little bit of Patty Waugh and what he's bringing to the Islanders. But yeah, great guest. I know tomorrow we're going to make sure we get Frank on off the top of the show to discuss, other news, trade targets, what coaches are on the hot seat. I know Toronto sort of tempered that a little bit with the win last night in Seattle, but, not a dull moment right now in the league, Johnny. So we should have a lot of good stuff to talk about throughout this week.
Yeah, I'm excited, and we're getting ready for All-Star break, so it's going to be a jam-packed week this week with everything going on next week with teams taking off and whatnot. So that's going to wrap up today's show. We're going to have a lot for you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for being in the chat. Sorry we didn't get to any chat questions today. We should have a lot of time for the chat tomorrow, but tune in tomorrow, 9 a.m.
Get in the chat tomorrow with Frank too. Like, if you have questions for Frank Saravalli, he'll be on right off the top of the show tomorrow. So get in the chat early, and we'll definitely fire off some of your things to Frank if you want, to know about certain, players, coaches, instances, or whatever.
But thank you again to everyone for listening. Thank you to our producer, Vic. Thanks to Thomas Hickey. Thanks to Colby. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.